Welcome to the presentation of a lecture from Gnostic Radio, a free public service from the Gnostic tradition of Samael Aun Weor. Gnosis is the root wisdom of all the world's great religions. Gnosis is a universal teaching of practical science, whose goal is absolute liberation from suffering and the complete development of the human being. This lecture is one of hundreds available as free downloads, podcasts, or transcriptions. Our lectures range in topic and complexity in order to address the many needs of humanity. We invite you to browse our library of lectures to find teachings that suit you. Each Saturday, Gnostic Radio broadcasts live and includes a free online classroom, allowing listeners to see images, read related scriptures, and ask questions of the speaker. To learn how to participate, visit gnosticradio.org. Gnostic Radio is a service of Glorian Publishing, a non-profit organization. The lectures and radio broadcast have been made possible by the financial support of listeners like you. Most spiritual schools recommend a donation of $10 to $20 per lecture. To make a donation, visit gnosticradio.org. Now, with heartfelt wishes for the end of suffering for all creatures, we begin the lecture. May all beings be happy.
Today, we're going to continue our talk about alchemy and pull together all of the lectures we've already given. So, in the last several lectures about alchemy, we've set up a sort of broad overview of the basic concepts and structures of practice in alchemy. Not the history and not the theories, but the actual material, energy, and consciousness involved in the process of alchemy. What it means to transmute energy and matter and consciousness, to transform it completely. Alchemy is a science of transmutation. That means that it's a science of thorough change, which is what transmutation means. And transmutation is not just in relation to matter, such as sexual matter, or any other physical matter like metals or chemicals, but rather transmutation refers to the entirety of a given thing. And alchemy really is about transforming ourselves. The real secret of alchemy. So it's been stated throughout the alchemical tradition that the entire basis of alchemy is Mercury. That without Mercury, there could be no alchemy. And we have saved this topic about Mercury till now because it's not easy. We wanted to set up for you a basic introduction to the concept and the practice of alchemy so that you get a sense of what it means and what it is. Because without that, you can't understand what Mercury is. Mercury is the foundation of the temple. But you can't understand the foundation until you see what the temple is first. If you saw the foundation alone, it wouldn't make any sense. So we showed you the temple. The temple is yourself, your being, the full development of who you ultimately should be. Mercury is what makes that possible. And that's why Samael Aun Weor stated that the wings of Mercury elevate us to the world of gods. So let us study Mercury and understand what it means. This image, the very first image, shows an image or an ancient painting on a vase of the god Hermes. In the Greek tradition, Hermes is the messenger of the gods. The one who conveys all the knowledge and wisdom of the gods to the other gods and to humankind, and even into hell itself. And Hermes is also a symbol of that force of divinity that guides those who have died, guides the dead, to their next residence. Of course, in this tradition, we always study these symbols for what they are. Symbols, myths that hide a truth. And the symbol of Mercury hides something in ourselves. This dead warrior on this vase does not represent a literal Greek warrior. It represents a warrior of consciousness. It represents someone who is dying mystically, who is dying psychologically, who is sacrificing himself and destroying and removing all of what is impure and animal in order to be reborn as something new. And Mercury, Hermes, is the one who facilitates that. So the Greeks called him Hermes, the Romans called him Mercury. The alchemical tradition talks about Mercury and used Latin to hide many of the secrets of alchemy. But really, Mercury comes from Hermes. So we need to study the Greek. These two images show very typical representations of Hermes Mercury. Hermes Mercury is always shown with his herald's staff, what nowadays is called a caduceus. And he also has wings on his head and on his feet. And this image on the left, which is from a Greek vase, he is pouring something into a fire, and the fire is in a cubic stone. And we don't see it on this painting, but the figure on the other side of the stone is the goddess Athena, or Nike, the goddess of victory, the goddess of war and wisdom. And the image on the right is a typical Latin or Roman style Mercury with his magic helmet and his caduceus, and again he's with the cubic stone under his feet. Here we see Mercury, Hermes, with his mother, Maia. This is significant because, as we've explained in many lectures, the syllable ma is always related to the mother. So in the Greek mysteries, we see that Hermes, Mercury, is the outcome or a product of Ma, the letter M. And this is very significant, as you'll soon see. And here in this image, he has in his hand his panpipes, which are one of his inventions or gifts to humanity. And the panpipes is a series of 7 cylindrical tubes through which he plays music, notes. And those 7 tubes or 7 passageways also have esoteric significance. Here we see, again, typical representations of Hermes. The image on the left, he is accompanied by a goat or a ram or a lamb and also a rooster. These are symbols that represent Hermes, which are very similar to the symbols that are used in modern times to represent Christ. Christ is represented by a lamb and also by a rooster. And again, the image on the right, we see the caduceus. The caduceus is nowadays wrongly applied to the medical tradition. This was a mistake that was introduced into our culture about 100 years ago by a single man who applied that symbol wrongly to the military medical tradition in North America. The actual medical symbol is a different symbol. It's a single serpent on a staff. The caduceus has 2 serpents on a rod, and there are many variations of this symbol. These drawings here are the most modern versions. But if you look at the Greek, they look quite different. In any case, they all represent something significant. A single straight staff with 2 winding serpents on the sides, and at the top, wings. All of this represents something spiritual, but in relation with our own selves, in relation with our own inner physiology and psychology. What is typically known about Hermes are some basic facts that you need to understand this lecture. First is that the name Hermes comes from Hermeneus, which means the interpreter. The job of Hermes was to be the messenger of the gods. So he was famous and known for his quality of speech. He was a powerful speaker and could convince people. In other words, he is related to the word, what in Greek is called the logos. The logos is related to the superior trinity on the tree of life, Keter, Chokmah, and Binah. This is the first, second, and third logoi, or the logos as a trinity. Hermes is the messenger of that trinity, the one who conveys the word. And as such, Hermes is capable of traveling anywhere in the cosmos. Is one of the few in Greek mythology who could enter and leave hell at will. And this is a very significant symbol. Furthermore, the Greeks said that Hermes invented fire. In this sense, he's exactly the same as Prometheus, who delivered fire to mankind. He also invented the lyre, or the instrument that Orpheus plays and that Apollo plays. A lyre is a 7-stringed musical instrument, much like a harp. He invented the panpipes, the alphabet, numbers, astronomy, music, fighting arts, and many other factors, all of which represent one thing: Kabbalah, the mathematics of existence. Kabbalah is a science of numbers. It's a science in which we analyze letters and numbers and hidden meanings and structures that are hidden in all things. All of these inventions of Hermes boil down to that. Hermes is a symbol, or is the patron of knowledge, of learning, of books, of writing, of speech. All of this is significant. And again, we're not describing just a so-called or supposed god from ancient times that no one believes is real. Hermes, Mercury, represents an aspect of ourselves, an aspect of the being, of divinity, a living, vibrating, actual force in nature that the alchemist learns to work with. And the sacred number of Hermes is the number 4. We see in this image one of the typical representations of Hermes amongst the Greeks. He was known as the lamb bearer. And so you'll see many different paintings and drawings of Hermes carrying a lamb or a ram or a goat. And Hermes was the god of sacrifices. He would be the one to bring the lamb, the goat, or the ram for the sacrifice for the gods. This also is very significant. So I'm presenting all of these facts so that we can understand the actual nature of Hermes. One thing that you won't often encounter is that the name of Hermes actually comes from Herma, which in Greek refers to a stone that is in a rectangular or square shape. And these have a very interesting structure. They are a small pillar with a human head on top, but directly in the center, an erect masculine sexual organ. You won't learn about this in high school or in grade school when you're learning about Greek mythology. But this is the single most significant symbol of Hermes. The most important. His name comes from this, Herma. These Hermae, or pillars of stone, were placed at crossroads all over Greece. A crossroad is a cross, an intersection of 4 directions. And these stones were placed there as a symbol of protection and as a symbol of divine blessing. So we see already very strong connections between Hermes and Christ from the Christians. The cross, the number 4, the lamb, the ram, the rooster. Being born from the mother, Maria, Mary. The Greeks would make offerings to these stones. They were considered so sacred that even in times of war, invaders would not damage the Hermae of their enemies. They would destroy everything else, but not the Hermae. That's how sacred they were considered to be, with good reason. This symbol hides everything about alchemy, everything about Gnosis, everything about Christianity, about the Egyptian mysticism, about Asian mysticism. It's all hidden in that simple symbol. The head represents the divinity, the perfected man, the primordial Adam, who comes out of the stone, who is perfected, who is sculpted, who is crafted out of stone, out of the earth. And the method to do it is through the erect masculine sexual organ, through sexual energy, through the upright, proper use with mindfulness of God, of sexual power. So this symbol is from the Eleusinian mysteries, the heart and soul of the Greek mythology. Mysteries that would never been communicated to humanity openly and publicly, even till now. There are many who claim to know all its secrets, but very few do, because those secrets are only conveyed through the internal worlds, not physically. This symbol hides for us the secrets of alchemy, and it's also hidden in the Bible. Jacob worshipped a Hermae. In Genesis 22, actually, I don't think it's Genesis 22. I think that's wrong. Anyway, in the book of Genesis, Jacob sleeps, has a dream of a ladder upon which he sees angels ascending and descending. And he hears in his dream the messenger of God telling him about the promise that God made to Abraham. And when he wakes, Jacob, so inspired and moved, raises the stone that he'd been using to rest his head and anoints it with shemen. And he says, "And this stone which I have set for a pillar shall be God's house." This passage is really significant in several ways here. Firstly, the stone is set up as a pillar. That stone is where he had rested his head. And remember, the Hermae are a stone pillar with the head on top. Moreover, he anoints it with shemen, which in the Bible is translated as oil. But if you look at the spelling of that, S-M-N, it is semen. Oil in the Bible represents transmuted sexual energy. The anointing of oil is a symbol of transmutation. And the Greeks, when they would visit the Hermae, when they would approach a crossroads or the border of a territory, would always anoint the Hermae with flowers, with oil, and with other substances. And that's what this image on the right shows. The Greeks making offerings to Hermes. But what is the most precious element that we have access to? The most sacred element that we can acquire, that has the most power, is sexual energy. It's the energy that we can use to create life. It has the power of God. No power anywhere compares. So to offer that energy to God is the most profound sacrifice you can make. And that's why the Greeks did it with these Hermae, and that's why Jacob does it in Genesis. But that offering is not literal physical oil. It's representing energy, forces that are sacrificed in order to perfect that stone, to realize the God that's hidden within it. The Hermae represent the power of Mercury that's trapped in the stone, the power of the messenger of the gods. And that's why the Masons utilized the stone as the most basic, fundamental symbol of Masonry. This comes from far before Egyptian times, this symbol. Here we see two different images from the tradition of Masonry. The one on the left, of course, shows George Washington, one of the founders of the United States. George Washington was a great Mason and knew these mysteries. And we see in that image two pillars. They look like Hermae, those Greek stones, or the stone of Jacob. The one on the left, the stone is imperfect, crude, rough. It has not been worked. It is raw. And the stone on the right is a perfect cube. It has been crafted. It is finished. These two stones are the most basic and important symbols of Masonry. Because at one time, centuries ago, Masonry was protecting this knowledge for humanity. Nowadays, that tradition has been lost amongst the Masons, but the symbols are still visible. The image on the right shows the same thing, but the stones are on opposite sides from the first image. We have the perfected stone on the left and the rough stone on the right. We don't have time to go into all the symbols in these drawings. The point is that these symbols of the rough stone and the perfected stone are in all traditions, but hidden, never given openly. This is the most open that you can find the symbols of the worked stone, the rough stone and the perfected stone. But we find it everywhere. Here we see, again, a Masonic tradition image on the far left that shows now three pillars. And in the back we see the rough stone and the perfected stone. We also see the ladder of Jacob. So clearly the Masons knew exactly what I'm explaining to you here. This ladder is the ladder to and from heaven. The middle image shows those same three pillars, but represented in Tibetan Buddhism. Those three pillars are not literal physical pillars in a temple in the physical world. They are pillars in your body. Pillars in your vital body, your astral body, your mental body. They are spiritual pillars, energetic pillars, only semi-material in the sense that they are matter, but not all physical in other dimensions. This image is from the Dalai Lama's secret temple in Lhasa, which was only recently opened to the public. And on the far right, we see those three pillars as represented in Kabbalah, the pillars of the tree of life. So we see three pillars. The central pillar is our spinal column. That is inside the temple, as you see in this image from Masonry. And the two pillars on the sides, Jachin and Boaz, from the Bible, from the Temple of Solomon, they are Ida and Pingala in Sanskrit. In Kabbalah, they are called Od and Obd. In Genesis, they are called Adam and Eve. They are the two serpents on the caduceus. These are the three pillars. The caduceus of Mercury shows us the three pillars of our temple, but developed, awakened. That's why the wings are there. Remember, Mercury gives us the wings to take us to the gods. Those wings are not physical, they are spiritual. So here in this middle image, an image from Hindu Tantra, the central column of the temple is the spinal column. The two side pillars are Ida and Pingala, two nadis, or channels of energy, that balance solar and lunar forces in us, physically, energetically, and consciously. All of this is in our spinal column, which is shown here at the right. And in Hebrew, that is represented by the letter Vav. Our spinal column is the column, central column of our temple. It is what holds our body up, not only physically, but consciously. Our spiritual body is held upright by the forces that flow through the spinal column. On the physical level, the spinal column is filled with a fluid. That fluid allows forces and energies to move up and down the spine through the nervous systems. That fluid is directly related to the fluid within which the brain floats. And that fluid is directly related to the sexual energy. Chemically, these two fluids, sexual energy and brain fluid, or cephalorachis fluid in the spinal column and around the brain, chemically they are almost identical. They're very similar. They are a kind of salty, liquidy fluid through which energies, forces move. These waters in sex, the spine, and the mind are ruled by Mercury. They are mercurial. In alchemy, they are symbolized by Mercury. If you think about it, it makes sense. This is the caduceus of Mercury. This is the staff of the herald. It's through this staff of our spinal column that the gods can speak to us and can hear us. We communicate through the forces that flow through our nervous system. The power of speech is driven by the nervous system. The power of thought, the power of emotion, the power of sensations, the power of perception on every level flows through our nervous systems. And our nervous systems all are united in the spinal column, in the brain, in the sexual energy. The sexual energy is what enlivens our nervous system. The sexual energy is what produces the electric shock of the orgasm, which shocks the entire nervous system, delivers a sensation throughout the nervous system. That's why people become addicted to it, without realizing that that electrical shock is actually destroying the organism. That's why people, the more they become addicted to it, they have to start taking pills, chemicals. They get addicted to more extreme stimulants in order to feel that energy, because it's destroying the nervous system and the brain and the sexual organs. All of that is mercurial, ruled by Mercury. So that letter Vav represents the spinal column. And the spinal column rests upon its foundation, which is, in Kabbalah, Yesod. And that's why in the book of Zechariah we read, the burden of the word of Jehovah for Israel, saith Jehovah, which stretcheth forth Shamayim, and layeth Yesod, the foundation, of Eretz, and formeth the Ruach of Adam within him. This phrase might appear cryptic to you if you don't know Kabbalah, but if you know Kabbalah, the meaning is immediately clear. Remember that Hermae, that pillar of stone. That pillar of stone is the foundation of the temple. You build a temple on stone. This is what Jesus instructed in the Gospels. Don't build it on sand. Don't build it on loose ground. Build it on the rock, the stone, the foundation. That foundation in Hebrew is Yesod. Yod Samek Vav Dalet. Here. Yesod means foundation, but it also means element. In these lectures so far, we've been talking about 5 elements. Akash, or space, air, fire, water, and earth. We can call all of those Yesod. They are elements. But they are all powerless without Mercury, without Hermes. So this phrase says the burden of the word. In Hebrew, word is dabar. We're going to come back to that. This passage here, Yod He Vav He, people in Western world translate that to Yahweh or Yehovah, but really that phrase of 4 letters is far deeper and more meaningful than they realize. It refers to the Upper Trinity, Keter Chokmah Binah, and the Ein Sof. So it refers to the holy gods at the highest levels, the archetypes of existence, the blueprints of the perfect man. The perfect man should be made into the image of God, the Tsalem. That image, or the blueprint, is in Yesod, but undeveloped. It is the rough stone, the brute stone. It is the plans, but not made. It is the sketch of the temple, but it hasn't been crafted yet. That is the burden of the word. Yod Hava, Yod He Vav He, stretcheth forth Shamayim, and layeth Yesod of Eretz in order to form the Ruach. The Ruach is the spirit. The Ruach is the essence, the spirit, the innermost, our monad, our inner God. That is the face that's emerging on that Hermae. The rest of it's unfinished. The face begins to emerge. That is the Ruach, who emerges out of the foundation of the earth. The earth is Malkut. We told you in other lectures that the earth is us. We are made from the dust of the earth. We are the impure Adam who needs to be perfected. We are made from Eretz, from the earth, from the dust. So, Yod He Vav He stretcheth forth Shamayim and Yesod. So now we know the earth is in Malkut. Yesod is related with our sexual organs. Where is Shamayim? Shamayim in the Bible is translated as heaven. Heavens, really, it's plural. But that's not the literal meaning of the word Shamayim. When you analyze the Hebrew, you see that this short passage, Shin, Mem, Yod, Mem, hides a lot. Really, this Shin is fire. We told you that in previous lectures. The letter Shin is one of the 3 mother letters. It represents divine fire, the fire of God, the fire of the Upper Trinity, Keter Chokmah Binah, the fire of Yod He Vav He. That fire, of course, the Shin has 3 parts. That is the Trinity. That fire is in Mayim. Mayim means water. And these 2 mems, the regular mem and the final mem, represent 2 aspects of water. The upper waters and the lower waters that God separates and establishes a boundary between. That is Mayim, 2 waters. The Yod is in the middle. This is the Yod from Yod He Vav He. So Shamayim literally means fiery water. That's here. That is Da'at. And how do we know that? Because Solomon told us. Interestingly, though, Yesod in Hebrew is an anagram. This is a rather known thing, which is very interesting, that Yesod is actually Sodi. If you put the Yod at the end, if you hide the Yod at the end of it, and remember the Yod is related to Yod He Vav He, it's spelled Sodi, secret. You know this is true because everything I'm telling you has been secret. Yesod, the actual nature of the foundation, the actual identity of it, has always been kept secret because we've not been prepared to use it wisely. That's where we get the phrase hermetically sealed. The secret of Yesod has always been kept silent, secret, private. But also it means that when you work with Hermes, when you work with Mercury, your vessel must be perfectly sealed. Nowadays, we use the phrase hermetically sealed to refer to a vessel, a jar, that nothing can exit or enter, not even air. Hermetically comes from Hermes, Mercury. Gnosis is a hermetic tradition. We are from the tradition of Hermes, Mercury. So that hermetically sealed, that secret, while it refers to the knowledge that should be kept secret, it also means that our yasod also needs to be hermetically sealed. Private, secret. Hermetically sealed means we let no energy escape. We retain the sexual energy, the forces of yasod, the foundation, so that that energy can be used to build our temple. That is the secret, the sodi, of all religions. And that's the secret that has caused the downfall of many when they have abused it. So here we see Hermes. This is an alchemical engraving that shows Hermes, but you see his caduceus is different here. It's a menorah. What is a menorah? It is a series of 7 pipes. The panpipes that Hermes invented. These 7 pipes conduct oil in their vessels in order to illuminate, to bring light, so that the fire can radiate. Do you see all the elements involved? The oil of Jacob, the oil on the Hermae, which brings the fire that Hermes invented, the fire of Shin, the fire that emerges on the 7 chakras, in the 7 bodies. We have told you already that the tradition of alchemy is hidden in the Bible, and that the greatest books of alchemy are the books of Genesis and Revelation. And if you've studied the alchemical tradition, you may have discovered that the alchemists occasionally quote the Bible, but rarely at length, and they never expose its meanings. Ever. Instead, they veiled all their knowledge in very cryptic and contradictory symbols. And that's because the symbols that are hidden in the Bible were considered too sacred and too profound to reveal. Nonetheless, Mercury Hermes is hidden throughout the Bible. We already explained that Mercury Hermes is very strongly related to the symbols of Christ. The lamb, the ram, the goat, the mother, many other ways. But when we look at the Bible, we discover that Mercury is there, but it was hidden. So I'm going to give you one example today. And I rushed through the beginning of this lecture so that we would have time to focus on this symbol. Because this is not easy to explain. And that's why I saved it till now. But it's important. In the Bible, Mercury is written with this passage, with these letters, Kaukab. Kaf, Yod, Kaf, Bet. In order to understand that, we need to analyze those letters a little bit. If you've studied our course on the Hebrew letters, and you remember what you studied, you'll already see the hidden meanings here. The letter Kaf represents the palm of your hand and the sole of your feet. Kaf is the 11th letter, which comes after Yod. I already showed you that Yod is the first letter of the holy name of God, the Tetragrammaton. Yod relates to the Sefer Keter. It also relates to Malkut. It symbolizes God in heaven, and it symbolizes the man. Yod is the 10th letter. We have 10 fingers, 10 toes. Kaf is the 11th letter. It represents the souls of your feet and the palms of your hand. How do you live? How do you survive? How do you work? How do you worship? How do you eat? How do you drink? How do you pray? With your hands. With your feet. They are the vessels, the vehicles, the tools that you need to survive. Here we see two kafs. And in between them is a vav. The vav is a yod extended. The yod, I told you, is related with keter at the top of the tree of life and malkut at the bottom. If that yod at the top of keter extends itself down into us, into mankind, into you, it forms a vav. That vav is your spine. In your spine, in your nervous system, you receive all the forces of the universe constantly as energies, which you utilize to live your life. And you harness those forces through your hands and feet. You see the symbolism? Furthermore, all of this happens sealed with the letter bet. The letter bet is the second Hebrew letter, and it means house. But not just a house on a street where you live and die. It means the house of God. Temples in the Jewish tradition are called Bet. Bet Israel. The house of Israel, the house of God. The house of the congregation of God. Bet is a temple. So, our hands, our feet, our spinal column in the house of God. All of this together means Mercury. Kaukab. Unfortunately, in the Bible, this was hidden, and this phrase kaukab, or this word rather, has been translated by another meaning, which is also accurate. And it says in the Bible, stars, instead of Mercury. Kaukab means both, stars and Mercury. Of course, we know in alchemy that the stars that we see in the sky are the light of realized beings. That light reflects from the Mercury of those beings. We know that stars are not just matter suspended in empty space. All things have three fundamental aspects. Without exception, all things have matter, all things have energy, all things have consciousness. A star is a sun that conveys enormous quantities of solar crystic light. A sun is a great being. It is a physical manifestation, a creation of a god to project light, to give life. A planet is a star in gestation, in development. And a galaxy is a star that has advanced and given birth to many stars. So there are levels and levels. These are all beings. So Kaukab is accurate both ways, as stars and as Mercury. But from our point of view, we need to know it as Mercury first. Now, it may be incidental, it may be accidental, it may be circumstantial, it might just be me. But in this particular painting of Mercury, of Hermes, I see all the letters of Kaukab. I find it very interesting. You see the shape of the letter Kaf? He's making it with his arm and with his feet. With his arm and leg. We could see Kaf, Vav on the body, Kaf, and Bet. Again, it might just be me reading too much into it. But I thought that was interesting. Some of these painters knew this mystery, so it could be true. To understand Kaukab, we need to understand something about the Bible. In the book of Genesis, chapter 1, we find the most important treatise of alchemy. first chapter of Genesis explains the entire process of alchemy, but cryptic, hidden. We don't have time to explain it all in detail today. Today I want to point out to you what's hidden there about Mercury. In that chapter, we see explained to us the 7 days of Genesis. Most people read that chapter literally and think that those 7 days refer to literal days in which God created the universe. The real meaning, the important meaning, is how the forces of divinity create the perfect atom, which is a self-realized God, which is another God. It is how the highest levels, those archetypes, hidden in the highest regions, take form and become a God. So, in that section of the Bible, it says, "And Elohim said, let there be lights in the firmament of Shamayim to divide the day from the night." Most people have read this and interpreted that to be literally how God made day and night and put the sun and the moon into the sky. That's not the meaning we need to see here. Firstly, we need to understand what Elohim is. This word Elohim does not mean God. Elohim is plural. That Yod Mem at the end indicates this is a plural word. The first part, Aleph Lamed, is El, God. That's how you say God in Hebrew, El. And that's the same El of alchemy. But if you add the He, which is in the middle, that El becomes Eloah, which means goddess. So Elohim means God and goddess, or gods and goddesses. Elohim unites masculine and feminine into one. Elohim is plural and singular at the same time. Elohim relates to those archetypes that are trying to come into being, that want to become. In order for that to happen, the Elohim said, let there be Maorot, lights. Now in Hebrew, normally when you say light, you say Aur, which is here, in Maorot. Aleph Resh, but there's a Vav in the middle. So usually it's spelled, it's not on this page, Aleph Vav Resh. But in this case, it's spelled with an M in the beginning, Ma. Ma is Maia, the mother of the gods. Ma, Ama, Mary, the mother of all the lights, Ma'arot. But what's curious about this is that the Vav is missing. This word, Ma'arot, should not be spelled this way, the way it is in Genesis 1:14. It should have a Vav. The Vav is missing. In the Bible, you can look. It's misspelled. Anybody can tell why already? The Vav is not developed. The Vav is the spinal column in us. It is imperfect. It is a rough stone. It has not been drawn out of the stone. Everyone know the mysteries of Arthur? King Arthur, who draws a sword from a stone? Do you know how you represent a sword in Hebrew? The letter Zayin, which is identical to Vav, except that the line is in the center. That sword that Arthur draws from the stone is the Kundalini, the energy that rises up the Vav. And when you unite the Vav and the Zayin together, the spine and the sword, it is the letter Het, which is how you spell the word life, Chai, spiritual life. So Elohim said, let there be lights in the firmament of Shamayim. I already explained Shamayim, the fiery waters. Those are those fiery waters in the superior level from which life emerges. And this light is established there to separate the day from the night. The day is Yam, and the day represents the light of Christ. The night is Lail, or in other words, Lilith, or Delilah, the tempting serpent, the tempting woman. And then it says in 1:15, and let them be marot in the firmament of Shamayim to give light upon Eretz. Eretz is the stone, is the earth. And we need light in order to craft that stone. Now, I explained to you that the Shamayim is related to Da'at. And this is where we know that from. In Proverbs, Solomon wrote, she is a tree of lives for those who hold her, and those who draw near to her are Asher. By Hokmah, Jehovah founded Eretz. By Tabun, knowledge, established Shamayim. With his Da'at, the abysses are split and the clouds drip dew. Here Solomon's revealing what we just explained from Genesis. The tree of lives, Etz Chaim, is this symbol, represented in this symbol. That symbol is yourself. But our tree has not grown yet. We are just a seed of a tree. We need the seed to grow. We need to be born again. Those who are drawn near to that tree are Asher. Asher means becoming. And that is how those archetypes in the world of Atziluth become through the process of perfecting the stone, Hermes, Mercury. By Hokmah and by Binah. This word tabun, knowledge, hides the passage Binah. And so these are here, Hokmah and Binah. Two aspects of that trinity. The divinity establishes Shamayim. So below these two, Shamayim. Shamayim is related here with Da'at. And this is what Solomon's pointing out. With his Da'at, the abysses are split. Da'at in Hebrew means knowledge, but not just book knowledge. It means knowledge of Mercury. Knowledge of the forces of the Maorot, the lights that are hidden in the Shamayim, the fiery waters. Those fiery waters are firstly the waters of the Upper Eden that descend in creation to give life to the earth, Eretz, which is in us. Now it is our duty to harness that light and work with it to perfect ourselves. And that's what Solomon's telling us to do. That is what allows the abysses to be split, to cleave them, to cut them, to separate them from the tree of life. The abysses are here represented in this image below Malkuth. The abysses are Sheol, hell. The abysses are your own mind. All your animalism, all of our pride, all of our lust, all of our envy, our greed, our gluttony, our fear, our arrogance, our anger, our hate, our jealousy. None of that can be in the perfected stone. None of that can go to heaven. None of it. It has to be separated. It has to be purged and purified. That's what alchemy means, to transform lead into gold. The lead is our ego. The lead is our desire. It is a base, heavy, impure metal that sinks into hell. To be liberated from hell, you have to liberate the energy that's trapped there. That energy is sexual energy, emotional energy, mental energy, psychological energy, trapped in our addictions, in our attachments, in our resistances, our fears, the things we avoid, such as the truth. Those abysses of our psyche are split with knowledge, da'at. That is knowledge of ourselves, but that is knowledge empowered by Mercury. Without Mercury, this work is impossible. It cannot be done. Someone who ignores the secret or does not know the secret of alchemy, of Mercury, can never liberate themselves from the abyss. Ever. only mechanically, but not consciously. To consciously liberate yourself from the abyss, you have to know this secret, this sodi. So Genesis continues and says, and Elohim made two great lights, the greater light to rule the day and the lesser light to rule the night. The Kaukabim also. So that image I just showed you of the tree of life shows two great regions, the heavens and the hells. Those are those lights. The greater light and the lesser light. But those lights are in us. We can talk about heavens and hells all day long, but it means nothing unless we experience it. So we need to start from what we can experience here and now. Heaven and hell are psychological states here and now. Hell is a state in which we are addicted to desire, in which we are suffering in the wilderness. We lack knowledge of God. We are afflicted with karma. We are powerless to change anything fundamental. The only changes we can make are very superficial and ultimately meaningless without the power of God, without the power of Mercury. We can move from one city to another, change jobs, change wife, change husband. Our suffering remains intense. Our spiritual knowledge remains empty, lacking. To have fundamental, real change, we need to understand this trinity of forces expressed in this chapter of Genesis. The greater light, the lesser light, and the Mercuries. The greater light is the light that shines in Shamayim, through Da'at, the upper trinity on the tree of life. That is the light in Nirvana. That is light in our consciousness. But you cannot see it if you're trapped in your ego. This is why we learn to meditate. To take the consciousness out of the ego in order to experience the light, the divine light, the real light, the true light, the clear light. What in Tibetan Buddhism is called Rigpa. We don't see that. We only know the lesser light. And that is the light that has been conditioned, that has been trapped in the lowest levels of the cosmos, which is our mind, our psyche. Everything we see physically, we see because of light, physically. But that's not our most important type of vision. How we see psychologically is billions of times more important. We all know that two people can experience the same event or be present at the same event and experience it in two completely separate, different ways. Totally different. They saw the same things, they were in the same place, but their experience was completely different. Why? Because how the light was filtered through their perception. One of them may have been filtering that light through their pride, and one through their shame, or through their anger, or through their lust. One through their greed, through their fear, through their attachment. Another through jealousy, through anger. All of us are victims of this. We don't see the light as it is. We see the light filtered through desire. Thus we don't see. That's why that scripture says, we see through a glass darkly. The person who wrote that was a Gnostic. The way to resolve this difference, in order to split these realms, to cleave the abyss, to bring real light to the abyss, we need the Mercury, the Kaukabim, which here is plural. Because really there's not just one Mercury, Hermes. There are many. Many types. The secret is in learning about Shamayim, the fiery waters. I told you these waters are in our spinal column and our sexual energy in our brain. If we look at these letters, we can see the meaning. The letter Shin is the fire of Christ, the fire of the upper Trinity. Divine fire. The two Mems relate to the waters in our body. the waters of the brain and the spinal column, and the waters of sexuality. And the Yod is related with Keter, which is in our heart. It's related with the being, with the presence of God in our temple, which is our heart. So observed in this way, Shamayim shows us what we need to do. We need to bring the fires of the Shin out of the waters. It's hidden there already. How do we know that's true? Where do a man and a woman experience fire? Intensity, heat, temperature. Remember, I explained in the first lecture of this series that the elements are not literal elements. They hide psychological states, ways that energy and matter move, and consciousness, the way they move. Fire relates to temperature. Where do we experience temperature? Not physically, but psychologically. Naturally, in emotion. But where do we first, most profoundly experience that? Through sex. The most intense fire that you can feel is sexual fire. So that Shin, of creative power of God, is hidden in the sexual waters. But it's also hidden in your brain. The creative potential, the fire of inspiration is in the brain. Those fluids, the liquid that the brain is suspended in. And that fire is moving up and down the spinal column as electricity, as the energy that enlivens all of our perceptions. We need that fire in our heart. But unfortunately, with most people, they've never felt the fire of the divine in their heart. That fire emerges through the power of the letter Yod. It is the power of Shin, because you see that Shin is 3 Yods connected. Those 3 Yods are here in our 3 brains: mind, heart, sex. They're in our glands. They are in our atoms, cells, molecules, organs, everywhere. In other words, in our inner Mayim, the waters inside of us, is hidden the Shamayim, the archetypes. Let's look at that from another angle. People say that we were created in the image of God, in the likeness of God. This is true only out of politeness. God is not animal like us. The divine is pure. We are made into the image of God in the sense that we can become that. We can be asher, as Solomon said, becoming. For that we need to be perfected. But the potential is there. Remember that Hermae, the pillar with the face of the god on top. The whole body of the god is hidden in the stone, but not carved out yet. We are that. We can be a Buddha, an angel, a master, if we perfect ourselves. If we destroy the animal in our minds, hearts, and bodies. This means that Shamayim, as an archetype, is hidden inside of us. We just need to know the secret to work with it. That secret is through retention of energy, transformation of ourselves. And in that, we find the power of Shin, Christ. This is why Hermes is called the lamb bearer. Kriophoros. Typical image of Hermes, carrying the lamb. The lamb is a symbol of Christ. We've all seen images of Jesus carrying a lamb. Jesus is called the shepherd. So is Hermes. As a matter of fact, so is the Buddha. All were shepherds or caretakers of animals. We are animals. But we are not meek sheep. We are pigs. We are dogs. We are filthy animals. We are not innocent sheep. All of us have the potential, if not the actual action, of killing, lying, cheating, stealing, fornicating, adulterating. All of us have committed all these crimes, and many of us do it every day in complete ignorance of doing it. So we have not reached the state of being made into the image of God. Nonetheless, Hermes, Christ, can help us do it. That Hermae has been represented in all these traditions in different ways. In alchemy, we see it as the athanor, the oven. We also see it as the well, a stone structure that hides the water. The water is heated with fire, and from that emerges a purified substance. In the middle image, that purified substance is represented in this hermetically sealed vessel, within which is Mercury. In this case, his caduceus has many serpents. We'll talk about that later. But all this is illuminated by the Marot, the lights of Shamayim, the Shin. This symbol hides perfectly everything that we just explained. And this one also from alchemy does the same. Through the union of the two forces, masculine, feminine, Adam and Eve, in the waters of sex, with chastity, the pillar of the Hermae is perfected and made into the temple of God. Beautiful paintings. Here it is again, represented in alchemy. This is the second key of Basil Valentine. In this key we see Mercury Hermes uniting with the goddess of love. Her name is Venus. Her name is also Aphrodite. When Hermes and Aphrodite unite, they form Hermaphrodite. Male, female. What is that? A hermaphrodite truly, really, has nothing to do with people nowadays say it is. A hermaphrodite, the union of Mercury and Venus, is Elohim, God and goddess. A perfect being. The perfect balance and union of masculine and feminine united as one. When we enter the sexual act, we mimic that. We enter into a sacred temple, the union of polarities to form a unity, but we corrupt it with our lust, with our jealousy, with pride, with arrogance, with our animal desire. For us, we don't have a pure, clean temple. Our temple has been made into a brothel. This symbol represents the goal of alchemy, the union of these forces. And here we see in the bottom a cherub, which is an angel, holding a hermetically sealed vessel. So in that Bible scripture from Genesis, it said Kaukarim, multiple types of Mercury. There are many forms of Mercury. We study 3 primary forms, but these are not the only 3. These represent the 3 aspects of Mercury that we need to know about if we want to perform this work. All of us have the first type, the brute Mercury. This is the unperfected stone, the raw energy of sexuality. That energy is flowing in our system right now. It may not be active in order to produce the orgasm or to produce the erection or the humidity of the woman, but that energy is in motion in us. It affects our 3 brains continually. That energy is always involved with our psychological processes. It is always moving. It is Mercury, quicksilver. It is not static. It is very kinetic. It is very fast. It is always on the lookout for a place to express itself in the mind, in the heart, or in the body. Constantly. It never is just sitting there waiting for you to come and talk to it or use it. It isn't like that. It is a highly dynamic energy that is constantly in motion. If you learn this science, you learn to, from moment to moment, transform your perceptions of all things, inside and outside. You are learning to transmute energy. Psychological energy, spiritual energy, physical energy. That transmutation is in many levels. The ability of a beginner to transmute energy is very different from someone who has a lot of experience transmuting energy. The process is different, the results are different. Nonetheless, someone who succeeds in consciously transforming an event, a perception, not being identified, but being cognizant in remembrance of God, liberates energy. That can be through perceptions in the eyes, the ears, the tongue, the nose, the skin, the mind. That transmuted energy, without the influence of lust or pride or envy or fear or gluttony or greed, etc., is the metallic soul of the Mercury, the second type. It is clean energy. I know in these times we're all talking about clean energy to power our houses and cars. This is not the clean energy we're talking about. You can't buy this. You can't make it in a laboratory physically. You have to make it in your inner laboratory, psychologically. And that's the process of conscious transformation of impressions. That transformation of impressions is a continual process from moment to moment in all things, in all places, at all times, whether you're physically active or physically sleeping. Never stops. And it has a significant peak. A moment in which there is more potential to transform energy. The potential is there all day, all night, to be transmuting energy all the time. But there is a particular moment when we can access more. And that's when you engage in the sexual act. If you engage in that act in the same way we've been describing, consciously, cognizantly, awake, aware, remembering God, you are connecting directly to the power of Shamayim. If you can retain self-cognizance and separate yourself from your animal desire and instead cultivate not only remembrance of God, but genuine and sincere love for your partner, you can access the greatest power you will ever access. And that is the power of Shin, the fire of God that's hidden in sexuality. It is the power of the Elohim. That is the power that the Elohim use to create worlds. But they do it at their level. At our level, we also use it to create worlds, but psychological worlds, worlds of fantasy, worlds of illusion. We create worlds too, but our worlds are lies. Lies that we tell ourselves that have no basis in reality. But if you awaken consciousness, if you harness the energy of sex, you can transmute that Mercury into the metallic soul of Mercury. That awakened energy begins the process of creation, but not physically. The normal way of sexuality, you create psychological worlds, and you might create a physical world as a child, a baby. That's another world too. But if you harness it psychologically, consciously, you can also create the soul. That is a child, but spiritual. It is not your child, it is the child of your innermost, the child of your divine mother. That child is created through the process of the fertilized Mercury. How that Mercury is ultimately established. The fertilized Mercury is the most refined, perfected aspect of the Mercury. It is the perfect stone. It is the Mercury fully developed. It is the Mercury of a master. We don't have that. So this image from Alchemy shows these types of Mercury. We see the battle of energies. In the middle, we see Hermes with two caduceuses. So many people read this image, they look at it and say, well, there are two Mercuries here because you see the sun and the moon, and he's holding two Mercuries. There's three. There are three there, not two. Do you see the third one? We see a caduceus in each of his hands. Brute Mercury and metallic soul of the Mercury. These are these two. Brute Mercury is the blind man with the sword. We are blind, and we are hiding our faces from the truth, just as he is. And on the left, we see a man who's beginning to awaken his eyes, who is restraining his left hand behind his back. The left hand is the left side of the tree of life, the domain of Lilith, desire. He is with willpower, restraining Eve, the left side. And holding in his right, his spinal column with the serpent of brass that Moses raised to heal the Israelites. So that is the metallic soul of the Mercury. These are the caduceuses of those two sides. Where's the third Mercury? It's Hermes himself. Hermes the god. He is the fertilized Mercury, the perfected Mercury. He is, as you see his symbol above his head, he's wearing here a crown. That crown is Shin. This is Shin, 3 points. This is also Shin. Do you guys know this symbol? Yeah. You ever heard of Mr. Spock or Dr. Spock? Leonard Nimoy gave this symbol intentionally as a symbol of Shin. So that symbol of the crown represents the three forces of the crown, Keter, Shin, and above him is the sign of Mercury. And you see that sign is the sign of Venus with horns. Interesting. Who else had horns? Anybody know? Moses. Mercury and Moses, same thing. Moses was born from the waters, right? Moshe means born from the waters. The waters of Mercury. So all of this is hidden in the Bible. See, I'm only now getting to the part that was so complicated that I wanted to explain to you. This has all been the preface for this. All of this is hidden in the story of Abraham in the Bible. Let me remind you that the Bible is symbolic, not literal. When we read about Abraham, yes, there was a master, there was a man named Abraham, and we respect him, and we owe a lot to him, but we're not here to talk about him. We're here to talk about what he represents. Abraham in the Bible represents our innermost, our being. You see, Abraham is the father of the tradition. He's the patriarch of the religions that we follow. In other words, he is our inner father, our own inner patriarch. And in the Bible, we see that Abraham had 2 wives. Many use this as an excuse to justify their adultery. But this is a symbolic story in the Bible that is Kabbalistic. There are 2 significant chapters that I want to talk about today, and they are Genesis 21 and 22. I suggest you read them and meditate on them. I don't have time to get into all the details. They are very beautiful, especially when you study them in light of what we're teaching today. But to quickly synthesize it, chapter 21 begins with what we've been talking about in recent lectures, where Sarah, the wife of Abraham, sees his other wife and the son of his other wife and says, "Get them out of my sight. They don't deserve the inheritance." So Abraham has to exile his wife Agar. And now Agar is symbolized as a slave woman, and she has a son named Ishmael. So it's Abraham's son and wife. So Abraham gives her some food and a bottle of water and sends her to the desert. Sounds like the Garden of Eden with Adam and Eve leaving. Same symbol, another level. She goes into the desert, into a place called Beersheba. Sounds like Bathsheba, the wife of David, because they are related. She goes into the desert, and soon the child's water runs out, and she's afraid the child will die. So she puts him under a bush, a tree, and walks away to pray to God. And it says in the Bible there, "And the messenger of Elohim called to Hagar out of Shamayim." Most people read this and think that it was just some angel that came out of heaven to talk to her. No. The messenger of God is Mercury. Mercury is always the one who travels up and down the tree of life to deliver the messages of God. Mercury speaks on behalf of God. If you want to talk to God, you need to talk through Mercury, and that Mercury is in yourself. Do you want to know why you've never heard from God or been able to have God hear you and know that he heard you? It's because you don't have Mercury, capable of reflecting the image, the message. If you work with Mercury, talking with God becomes normal. Here we see Hagar had that. Even though she's the slave, the bondwoman, she receives communications from God. The messenger of God comes and says, "Open your eyes and look." And then she opens her eyes and she sees a well in the desert. And she takes water and she gives it to her son, and he lives. And it says, not directly in the translation, but if you read in the Hebrew, it says in the Hebrew that he did well and went on and became an archer. But if you look in the Hebrew, it says, and he fulfilled dabar, the word. Now, right after that, in this same chapter, 21, Abraham builds a well. Completely unrelated, it appears, to what happened to his wife. He builds a well. He sets 7 lambs there and says, "These lambs may be a witness that I have dug this well, and I will call it Beersheba." If you read this literally, it makes no sense. Because literally, if you read it in order, literally, it's his first wife, or his wife, Agar, goes into the desert to a place called Beersheba, and God shows her a well, and she gives water to her son, and he lives. And then somewhere else in Beersheba, Abraham builds a well and names it Beersheba, and has a bunch of lambs there. Why would that be written in the Bible? Why would that be important literally? It isn't. But symbolically, spiritually, it's very important. The next part, right after this, the messenger of God comes and says, "Take a lamb and your son and make a sacrifice." And when he takes his other son, Isaac, God says, or the messenger says, "Sacrifice your son to me." And Abraham starts to do it, to kill his son. But the hand of God, the messenger of God, restrains him and says instead, "Don't sacrifice your son, sacrifice that ram, that goat, that lamb that's in that tree over there. So Abraham sacrifices the goat, the ram, instead. And again here in the passage it says, and the messenger of Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh called unto him out of Shamayim. Do you see that all of this is related with Mercury? The water in the well. A well is a stone structure that reaches into the earth to get the water. The water is what keeps us alive in the desert. Here we see Isaac being sacrificed on a Hermae, the stone pillar. And the messenger of God, Mercury, says, don't sacrifice your son, sacrifice the goat. Here in this other image, we see Mercury, Hermes, bringing the goat for the sacrifice. It's all beautifully represented. Judaism, Christianity, and the Greek mysteries are the same. No difference. The differences are our inability to see the truth. This tree or bush where the goat is trapped is the same tree or bush that Ishmael was put under when he was dying. It is the same tree or bush that Moses sees burning in the wilderness. The burning of the altar, the burning of the sacrifice. All of these symbols are showing the same essential story. The sacrifice that we have to make is related with those lights. I told you already that Abraham relates to our innermost, the Sephirah Chesed. His wife Sarah, who gives birth to Isaac, is related with Da'at. She is the Ma of Malrot, the divine mother. She, Sarai, relates to the divine mother where all the archetypes are hidden. She is the mother of God. She is Maia, the mother of Hermes, the mother of Jesus. And Hagar is physicality. Yesod and Malkut. Ishmael, the son who goes into the wilderness, is the impure Adam. It is us. We are dying in the wilderness because of thirst for knowledge. Thirst for the truth. Thirst for the waters of Mayim that we have been wasting in our abuse of sexual energy, our abuse of psychological energy, our abuse of the sacred waters of Eden. Mercury can save all of that. Mercury shows Hagar, open your eyes. Those eyes are not physical, they are psychological, conscious. Open your eyes means awaken. The well is right in front of you. You just don't see it. The well is your body. The waters that you need for spiritual life are hidden in Yesod, the foundation stone, the foundation of the temple. This is the well. The Mayim is hidden here in Yesod. That's why Yesod is also called the Lower Eden. In that region, we find the waters of life, the rivers of Eden. So if we learn to listen to the advice of Mercury, the messenger, and open our eyes, we can see the water is in us. It is our sexual water, emotional, mental, spiritual, psychological. The force is in us that we need to harness. If we do that, we can create the soul. We can raise Abraham, our innermost, in the eyes of God. Meaning that Abraham will then have to sacrifice his other son, Isaac, who is related to our soul. Isaac is born of Sarai, and Isaac represents the creation of the soul, the immortal bodies. But even then, Abraham has to give that to God, say, I don't own this, it's yours. To not take any pride or any possession of anything. To not have any attachment, even to the soul. But God doesn't kill Isaac. God kills Ishmael. So this is all here hidden. When Abraham succeeds in his ordeal and sacrifices the goat, then the messenger called to Abraham out of Shamaim the second time and said, By myself I have sworn, saith Yod Tevavhe, for because thou hast fulfilled the bar, and hast not withheld thy son, thine only, that in blessing I will bless thee, and in Rabbah I will Rabbah thy zerah, as the Mercury of Shamaim, and as the sand which is upon the seashore, and thy zerah shall possess the entrance to Oyeb. This is where Abraham receives the famous promise or covenant that everyone talks about. That all the people literally, physically claim gives them the right to commit crimes because they are the so-called children of Israel or the children of Abraham. And even Jesus corrected them. The child of Abraham does as Abraham did. Here the messenger, Mercury, calls out of Shamaim. Remember, Shamaim is not somewhere up in heaven. It is here inside of us. Abraham, the innermost, hears from God through our inner Shamaim, the fiery waters in us, and says, because thou hast fulfilled the bar. The bar means the word. Mercury is the god of eloquence, of speech. He delivers the word, the logos. He measures the word. And hast not withheld thy son, thine only. Well, Abraham had two sons. But God doesn't consider Ishmael to be important. Who's Ishmael? Our physical life. People often wonder why when we pray to God about my job and my paycheck and my car, God doesn't answer. Because God is not concerned with petty things. The only real son is the soul. So the messenger says that in blessing I will bless thee, and in Rabbah I will Rabbah thy zerah. Zerah means seed. What is the seed of a human being? Sexual energy, semen, the egg, the sperm. What is Rabbah? Rabbah, this word is very difficult to translate to English here because it has levels of meaning that are equally important. In the Bible it says multiply, in the English. And there is some truth in that. But really, Rabbah means rabbi, master. It also means virgin, maiden. So when you open your mind to think that all these meanings are equally true at the same time, then you can start to grasp the actual meaning that's written here, especially when you consider the letters that are involved. Resh is related to the head. Bet is the house of God. And He is the womb of God, the Divine Mother. Rabbah means a virgin. In your virginity, I will make a master of your seed. You could read it that way. That's accurate. In your maiden, your virgin, your damsel, I will multiply your seed. That is also accurate. That maiden is Neshama. Neshama is one aspect of the soul in Kabbalah, which is called the divine soul, represented by the Greeks by Helen, the most beautiful woman in the world. She is our pure, unadulterated consciousness. But unfortunately, she's now trapped in hell. She's now trapped in Troy, kept prisoner, suffering. So, as the Mercury of Shamayim, so the messenger is here saying, I will perfect your Mercury to be like the Mercury of Shamayim, to be the highest level. That's what's being said here. And your seed, your Zerah, will possess the entrance to Oyeb. This part is also very difficult to translate accurately. In English it says, and you will possess the gate of your enemies. And that has some accuracy when you understand the psychological component here, because our enemies, the enemies of God, are our own egos. The gate of the enemies is our senses. Sight, taste, touch, smell, hearing. The ego uses our senses to trap the consciousness and to fight against God. The ego uses our body, our heart, our mind to seduce us with our pride, our fear, our envy, our gluttony, our greed. And this passage is saying that the Mercury of divinity, if we are faithful to the word, to the covenant, will raise our Mercury to be like the Mercury of Shamayim, perfect. And in that way, we will gain entrance to conquering our enemies. We will control the gate, the senses. The other way to translate this word shayar for entrance is it can also mean price. So in other words, we will have paid the price. We will have the dharma, the coin with which to purchase our freedom. Curiously, this Oyeb hides something else that's rather odd. That word is actually the name of a place in Syria. And if you say the name in English, it's Eve. It's not spelled like in Hebrew, which is Hava. But it is pronounced that way. It's very odd. So after that blessing, Abraham returned unto his young men, his solar bodies, and they rose up and went together to Beersheba. And Abraham dwelt at Beersheba. So all of this that I just outlined for you in the book of Genesis 21 and 22, Hagar was in the desert with her son in Beersheba. And then Abraham builds a well in the wilderness and calls it Beersheba. And he takes 7 lambs to witness the building of the well. Then he has to sacrifice his son, but doesn't, and sacrifices a goat instead, and is given the promise. And after he's given the promise, he goes to live in Beersheba. So we see repeatedly throughout these 2 chapters, Beersheba, Beersheba. What does that mean? In Hebrew, bar, beth, aleph, resh, means well, a physical well. Not to be well, not the state, but the thing. A well in the earth to get water. Sheba means 7. Sheba. Well 7. Seems strange, doesn't it? So much of the story of Abraham, the conclusion of the founder of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, 3 of the most important religions in the world, all of it revolving, the ultimate point of his story is all about this place, Beersheba. And no one's ever said anything about it. It's right here. Hidden in alchemy. Here's the well. Here are the 7 bodies of the soul. Under the 3 forces of the Shin, united in Da'at, in the well of the 7. In the middle here of these 7 that are in the earth, Eretz, our earth, hidden as archetypes, we see Apollo, the god of the sun, Christ, and he's playing a lyre. that instrument that Mercury invented that has 7 strings. Those 7 figures there represent the bodies of the being, the immortal soul, the solar bodies. And we see that same image here. Another image from Alchemy with Mercury flying in Shamayim, directing 7 currents of forces into a well that is filled with fire. And in the center of that fire is the united 6-pointed star of David, the symbol of Da'at, between the 2 trees of the Garden of Eden, the tree of life and the tree of knowledge. All of that is 100% alchemical, but drawn straight out of the Bible and never explained. And all of that, of course, is happening because of the elements and because of the 2 great lights, the Malrat, the lights of the day and the lights of the night. So alchemy is hiding all of that. Those 7 bodies, those 7 lambs, those young men that Abraham takes to live in Beersheba are the 7 serpents that the Buddha has raised. They are the 7 pipes of the pan pipes through which the oil creates the fire of Shin. They are these 7 bodies on the tree of life. Chesed, Abraham, is the Atmic body. From his point of view, it is the first. We have the Buddhic body, the divine soul, which is Neshama, Helen of Troy. Causal body, Tiferet, Arjuna amongst the Hindus. Mental body, astral body, vital body, physical body. These are the 7 bodies of the being. These are the 7 stages of alchemy. The 7 steps up to the temple. When these 7 steps have been risen, Atman, the being, Abraham receives the promise, the covenant from God. This is how Isaac, through this process, is developed and grows. The goat is sacrificed. The goat must die. The goat is our animal mind, our animal heart, our animal desire. It all must die. It has to be purged and purified so that the purity of God can shine. And that's why Samael Aun Weor said, whoever possesses the Mercury of the wise will attain final liberation. To attain the philosophical stone would be impossible if one does not first of all get to know oneself. That philosophical stone, or the stone of the philosophers, is what has been hidden in all the alchemical treatises and never fully explained. It is the stone of Mercury. It is Yasod, the foundation, sexual energy, perfected, made clean and pure, made divine. And that's how we gain entrance to heaven. Do you have any questions?
How come sometimes in some of the alchemical paintings, the sun is where Yasod will be? Is it just because the Gnostic force is there with the Mercury and the water?
Is there a particular painting you're talking about?
Not in this one, but one of the past ones is like the guy standing and he's got a crown and it's got all the planetary spheres, but the sun is over the central organs.
Where in us can we find that God is able to create through us? It's through sex.
So it's in both, obviously, in the heart also here.
Well, yeah, the fire of God is in every atom. It's in everything. It's in all of our cells, and that's what gives us life. But our life now is very superficial and shallow. So we can say that Christ is in all of us already. We have Shin here. That's how we're alive. We're living. But that Shin is not awake. It's not fully developed. It's not able to act through us because we're so full of impediments. We don't have the vehicles capable of transmitting that light. So that's why when we study the scriptures, we always see this process of purification and perfection, so that we have to clean the brass, as it said. The brass is that menorah. It's the brass serpent. We have to clean it. And that means it's a symbol of how these bodies, which represent our psyche, have to be not only created, but then perfected and made capable of transmitting the light of Christ. We're not there. Quite simply, if the full light of Christ that's radiating in Shamayim, that Marot, were to enter into us right now, we would be completely obliterated. Because we don't have the ability to transmit that energy. We simply can't convey it. It would completely vaporize us, even physically. So Christ won't do that to us. Christ is the force of love. So Christ needs a vessel through which it can be expressed, and the vessel needs to be capable, and that's why the soul has to be created, the solar bodies. And that's represented in the Bible, in the story of Daniel, when the men who refused to renounce the worship of God were put into the furnace. That furnace is the fire of Shin that purifies the base metals, and it purges everything that's impure. But those men were not burned in the furnace, and those men represent the bodies of the soul. So we have to go through that in order for the fire that's in all of us. The fire is in all of these levels. It says in Genesis, the fire is even in hell. The Marot, the lesser light, even illuminates the regions of Lilith. And Hermes can go into those levels and transmit information. Mercury. But that's not the same as being awakened and self-realized. So you'll see the sun, the light, all over the place. More questions?
The Rabah, that's the same word used when it's commanded to be fruitful in Rabah.
That's right. That Rabah is, be fruitful is Rabah. Be fruitful and multiply is what it says. But it says Rabah. Which would be, again, the translation could be read different ways. It can be fruitful spiritually and be a master, a rabbi. Also could be fruitful and be a virgin. Which really, we need to recover that virgin state to return to Eden. To be naked and not ashamed. Like Adam and Eve were before the abuse of the tree of knowledge. That's not naked physically, it's naked psychologically. Nothing to hide. No shame. In the presence of God, no shame. Can you imagine that? To be that clean? If you really sit and meditate and imagine being in the presence of God and be aware of all the dumb things you've done, all the crimes you've committed, all of your jealousy and envy and lust, it's horrible. And then when it actually happens to you, when you're in the presence of a divinity and you become in remembrance of your impurity, it's a horrible feeling. So we're not there yet. We're not Rabbah. But we need to become like little children to enter heaven again. Any questions back here?
Those being hermetically sealed also relate to the three vehicles of Buddhism, with the foundation being ethical discipline?
Does being hermetically sealed relate to the three vehicles of Buddhism and esoteric discipline? The phrase hermetically sealed refers to how we manage energy. And it refers primarily to sexual energy, but also emotional and mental energy. The vehicles of Buddhism relate to the Trikaya, which are here at the top of the Tree of Life. Dharmakaya, Sambhogakaya, and Nirmanakaya. For those to be developed, the mind stream of that person already had to be hermetically sealed for quite a long period of development, to be purified of all impurities. And after that point, the phrase hermetically sealed is no longer valid, because the energy is then flowing in its natural, perfect state with no need for modification. So it is hermetic in the sense that it is perfect, but it no longer needs to be restrained in the sense that it is no longer capable of criminal act criminal action. So that energy then moves naturally, spontaneously, in a perfect way, as Hermes, through all the regions of the cosmos. So I think the phrase hermetically sealed doesn't apply directly in that context, if I understood the question correctly. Another question?
What do the 3 nails on the cross mean?
The 3 nails on the cross represent trials that the initiate has to face in relation with the perfection of the soul in order to enter into resurrection. And you notice that those nails, which are made of iron, the metal of Mars, pass through the kaf, in the center of each hand, and through the feet, which are hidden in the word for Mercury. So let's look at that. Kaukab. 2 hands, palms of the hands, and through the feet, 3 nails. So those nails represent very strong ordeals or trials that the initiate has to pass at very high levels of development. This is after the creation of the soul, after the elimination of the ego, before the person's preparing for their final resurrection. More questions?
Regarding the alchemy of changing elements, vegetarianism has kept my experience peaceful most of my life. When I tried to eat meat, I saw horrible acts. I am guessing these acts belonging to the flesh I ate. I fire meat is absolutely necessary.
Okay. The question is about eating meat. A person is saying that as a vegetarian, they have very peaceful experiences, and when they eat meat, they see terrible things and suspect it's due to the consumption of the meat. There is no question that when food is prepared, it receives the energy of its journey before it reaches your mouth. So the growth and development of any plant, of the water, of the air, of the animal, through its entire cycle until the moment it comes to you, it is bringing all of that experience to you. So if that vegetable or that fruit or that water is filled with chemicals, it was grown in a place that had a very negative presence, a very negative influence. If that animal was treated badly, if it suffered enormously, all that energy is in that food. And then you eat it. And it affects your consciousness. It affects your mind. It affects your psyche. There's no question about that. That's why we have some lectures on our website called Healthy Spirituality that talk about how to make good food choices so that you can try to bring better elements into yourself to give you a little bit of advantage as much as you can get in these times. It's incredibly difficult. Food production on this planet is incredibly degenerated. It is hard to get clean, pure food. In fact, it might be impossible now. But we can try, and it makes a difference. Don't eat fast food. Don't eat processed food. Don't eat food out of boxes. Don't eat junk. Because when you're eating those things, you're eating where it came from. Food that's made to make a profit, not to make you healthy. Restaurants don't want to make you healthy. The grocery stores don't want to make you healthy. They want your money. And when you really analyze the substance, the conscious substance of the food you're consuming, you're taking in those values, craving for profit. I talked to a student one time who was very poor and was alone and needed to eat one day and went and had no choice, but it was in this remote kind of place and had to go eat at this pizza place and ate at this pizza place. And after that, for 2 or 3 days, was struggling enormously against this huge upsurge of lust and couldn't figure out why. And so decided maybe it was the pizza and went back to the pizza place and peeked in the kitchen, and the kitchen was filled with images of naked women. The cooks were indulging in their lust as they were preparing the pizza. It illustrates what I'm explaining. How and where your food is prepared affects you. We need to make smarter choices. Try to get clean, pure food. Not just physically clean of physical chemicals, but the psychological component too. You will be healthier if you cook at home. And if you cook aware of what you're cooking, and you even chant mantras, and don't think about all your problems, because if you're thinking about your problems, you're investing that energy in the food. I'll tell you another story I've told before, which is the funny one that I love. A meditator was old and retired, but meditating as much as he could, and he had a servant to prepare his food because he was too old. So he had given his servant strict orders about how to handle the kitchen. So one day, the meditator was eating his simple food. It was rice and dal or something real simple. And he started to have these thoughts about politics and about the world and started to feel worried and anxious and everything that's going on. And he stood up and went back to the kitchen, and there was his servant reading the newspaper. And he told him, never again read the newspaper when you're preparing my food. Because all the thoughts were invested in the food and affected the one who was eating. So what about us? Do we need meat? Should we be vegetarian? That's up to you. Eat what you want. Eat what makes you healthy. If you want to be a vegetarian, be a vegetarian. If you want to eat meat, eat meat. It is not what goes into your mouth that makes you a human being. It's what comes out of it. It's what you say, that's what Jesus told us. We're not here to make a religion out of the kitchen. We recommend, for certain stages of the work, the consumption of a small amount of meat can provide you with vital elements that are necessary. But not everybody needs it at all times. Some people need to be vegetarian, and it's better for them. I'm not in a position to tell you what you should and shouldn't eat.
So you mentioned that the cow-cow, you broke the Hebrew letters down and talked about the palms and the soles of the feet, and that represents Mercury. Is that also related? Is that one of the reasons why when we're vocalizing the vowels that we hold the palms of our hands up to the sun?
There are runic postures and yantric postures where we place the hands and feet in certain positions in order to receive and transmit energy. So, and we do that all the time when we talk. You know, we raise our hand to stop someone, and we also do this to call someone. So there's a physical thing there, but there's also an energetic exchange. The hands and the feet transmit and receive energy. We, in this tradition, we talk about 7 primary chakras related with spiritual development. We talk about 7 primary chakras related with organic vitality, which are different 7 chakras. Really, there are many, many chakras or transformers of energy throughout the body. Any place 2 nadis cross, you can call a chakra. And there are hundreds, thousands of nadis in the body. A chakra is a place where energies cross, where they exchange, where they meet and go away. So there are primary ones. There are chakras in your hands and feet. And they're related with different types of energies at different stages of the work. And that's also what the stigmata are related to that, the piercing of the hands and feet. But yeah, absolutely. When we do runes, when we do different mantras, you learn different positions and postures with the hands and feet in order to work with energy. That's all hidden in that cow cob. Anything else back there? No? Any questions? Yes?
In the picture with Hermes in the middle, holding the serpent staff, I'm not sure what that's called, and the 2 gentlemen besides coming at him, the gentleman on the left was holding his left hand in restraint, and I was wondering if that represented the differences between the left hand and the right hand paths.
Let me find it, and we'll talk about that. It's not that one. Too many pictures. This one.
Yes. And the gentleman on the left was holding his left hand in restraint, and I was wondering if that was favoring a certain path between the left hand path and the right hand path, the left hand being the Lilith's path of more like fulfilling desires to reach spirituality, and the right hand path being restrained desires to reach spirituality. I was wondering if that was making a valid difference.
I understand. We talk about the left-hand path and right-hand path in spirituality, and those 2 paths relate to the two sides of the tree of life. We talk about the three columns, the column in the center, and then the columns of the left and the right. The column of the left is the fallen aspect of the tree of life. And that column of the left is the domain of Lilith, which is the domain psychologically and spiritually in which the practitioners worship lust. They worship pride. They embody the ego. They seek to work with Mercury, but conditioned by desire. So in my interpretation of this image, you do see the solar and lunar aspects because you have the sun and the moon. But we need to understand that lunar is not always negative. So for example, we can call the left-hand path the lunar path, and that is accurate. But we can also say that anyone who's following a traditional path in a traditional religion is also on a lunar path, but they may be eliminating the ego. Because the lunar path can be positive or negative, in the sense that, for example, traditional Christianity, traditional Judaism, traditional Buddhism are all lunar paths. They are following ancient traditions. They are not following the new solar current. So we can say they are lunar. They're not negative, but they aren't following the new Christic current. So in my interpretation of this image of Mercury, this gentleman on the right-hand side with his head in his elbow is on the lunar path, but he's working with Mercury to awaken consciousness. And that's represented by the eagle. You see on his sword, there's an eagle. That's the Holy Spirit. If he was awakening through the path of Lilith, that would not be an eagle. It would be a devil, right? A demon. The Holy Spirit does not aid the devils, the demons. So you're right in the sense because he's got his head hidden under his left arm. The left arm represents the left side of the tree of life because we are blinded by that side. Lilith, our own inner Lilith. So I think, yeah, you're right, it's lunar, but maybe not demonic. Lunar in the sense that he hasn't awakened consciousness enough to enter into the solar level of the work, which is represented on this side of the drawing.
So is Gnosis particularly the path of the right-hand path? Or
Yes. Well, actually, no. Let me clarify that. In the beginning, for us, we enter into Gnosis as aspects of the right-hand path. And what I mean by that is, we learned the fundamentals or foundations of religion, which are the right-hand path. Those fundamentals are ethics, learning to do the right things and to stop doing the wrong things. And we also learn to sacrifice for others. Those are the three factors, right? Giving birth to virtue, killing impurity, and learning to serve. That is the right-hand path. So Gnosis is that for everyone in the beginning. But really, it is not the end of Gnosis. It is not the definition of this tradition. Gnosis itself is the middle path. If you were to be someone who followed your traditional religion, the first type of lunar path, you would be living in your physical body. You would try to do good. You'd do all the rituals. You'd go to church. You'd go to temple. But you wouldn't awaken consciousness. You wouldn't develop the soul. You wouldn't eliminate the ego. You'd just go through life, trying your best with your limited resources to be good. When you enter the right-hand path, the solar, or it's a semi-solar path in that sense, you start to learn about those three factors: eliminating the ego, giving birth to virtue, and serving others. And the ones who succeed in applying those forces in themselves and working with Mercury start to develop the soul, the solar bodies. They start to awaken. The one who reaches the birth of the Isaac is someone who has created the causal body. That person has become a Buddha, a beginning level. They have an aspect of themselves that is immortal. They still have ego. They still have pride. They still have problems. But they have awakened consciousness to a certain degree. They have risen the Kundalini 5 times. They have achieved the second birth. that person can continue at that level. And they will be on the right-hand path. And that is a solar path in this context. Now I'm saying that because at that juncture, the Sephira Tiferet, that person can make a choice to abandon the right-hand path and to enter the real solar path. Solar is always related with Christ, the Son. The real solar path is the path of the Bodhisattva. It's the path of the middle. It is the path of Da'at. So from Tiferet, direct, symbolically speaking, to Keter. The direct path is very difficult. And it's because in that path, you have to pay the entirety of your karma from all of your previous lives right now. You have to eliminate the entirety of your ego right now. You can't postpone it for other lives. You have to serve humanity 100% right now. In other words, you don't get to fulfill any of your desires. They all have to die. And that's represented by the road of Calvary. When Jesus took his cross and began to march up that road, and the crowds are persecuting him, spitting on him, torturing him, that is the path of the Bodhisattva. Humanity hates Bodhisattvas because they speak the truth. And humanity always martyrizes them, kills them, because they need it. That's how they pay their karma. That's how they pay what they owe. They serve, they teach, they give the light. And the walkers of the path of the left hate them. The path of the left is the path of the demons. Those are represented by all those who are attached to desire, attached to lust, and believe lust is the way. They believe pride is the way, or anger is the way. They hate the walkers of the middle path. But the walkers of the right-hand path also hate the Bodhisattvas. Because they are the scribes, the Pharisees, the people who have all their traditional religions that want to follow the traditions of their patriarchs. They don't want to revolutionize. They want to retain power. They want to retain their power in nirvana, which is related with Tiferet. So in Buddhism, all of this is represented in the Mahabharata. It's a great conflict. On one side you have all the demonic forces. On the other side you have all the angelic forces. And there's a huge battle. But right in the middle are the Bodhisattvas, who are caught in the middle, and everybody hates them. And those are the Pandavas. Krishna. Right in the middle of all the problems. And everybody is against him. The good guys and the bad guys. Right? So that's the path of the Bodhisattva. So we really talk about 4 paths. Path of the Bodhisattva, right-hand path, and we have the path of the regular people, and we have the left-hand path of the demons. So, you got a question?
On the 5th initiation, you mentioned the person still has ego,
Yeah.
has regular problems, everyday problems. Would this initiate necessarily be conscious of that level?
Yes.
Do they have awareness that that's the level of being they have?
Yes. To be at the level of having worked in or completed the initiation of Tiferet, or the creation of the solar body, or the solar causal body, this person has awakened consciousness in the 6th dimension. Not a lot, but they have to have awakened. Meaning that they have developed already the Kundalini in the physical body, which gives certain powers. Kundalini in the vital body, which gives certain powers. Kundalini in the astral body, which gives certain powers. And then the mental body, and then the causal body. These are levels of the fire awakening in our menorah. And that fire gives light. When you have light, you can see. When you can see, you have knowledge. So a person who is working in those levels has understanding, knowledge, insight, powers that they did not have before they started the process.
But the ego is still alive.
The ego is still alive. So they are a hasnamus. They are caught in the middle. They're in a very dangerous position because they're awakening consciousness, but the ego is still there, capable of taking that and becoming a devil, a real devil. And it's happened with many initiates. There's a very dangerous juncture there. Very dangerous. Here's the issue in simple terms. We talk about energy cannot be destroyed. So spiritual development is something that is constantly in motion. When you really study this, you understand that you've had other lifetimes. You've had other physical bodies. You've had other personalities. You may have worked in these types of studies before. You may have awakened some consciousness before. You might have awakened Kundalini to some degree before. So if you did that, why don't you have it now? This is always the question that students have. Maybe I did the work. Maybe I was a great master. Maybe I was a Buddhist, or maybe I was a rabbi. All the speculation. But they don't think, if I was that, why am I not that now? Why am I so asleep? Why do I have so many problems? Why am I suffering? Why am I not awake? The reason is because of the ego. Let's say, for example, that you did awaken to some degree. Let's say, as an example, that in a previous existence you found the teachings in some group. You learned how to work with Mercury. You awakened Kundalini. Let's say you raised it up through the vital body. And so you had awakened powers physically and in the fourth dimension. So you were able to meditate. You were able to investigate things. You were awakening. Well, now you don't have that. Why? Because some ego diverted you. So let's say you're recapitulating your process. You're entering back into the studies. You're starting to awaken again. You're feeling like, yeah, I did this before. I know this stuff. It feels right. But without any awareness, without any recognition that you did it before and you fell before. Will you approach that same juncture and overcome it, or repeat the mistake? The tendency of the ego is to repeat.
So the solar bodies were created, they're just not active.
In some people. A few people. Some people already have the solar bodies. Most don't. Some of us have been in these types of studies in different traditions, some in alchemy, Islam, Christianity, and maybe have awakened to some degree, maybe have created some level of the being or the soul. It's possible. But if we don't have those powers and abilities now, it says that we have some ego that we need to be very aware of. What is that ego? Is it pride? Is it lust? Is it anger? What is it? If we've done the work before, what took us out? We need to know that. Because when we start recapitulating what we formerly had, we will face that ego again, and it will be stronger. Because when we failed before, we fed it. We strengthened it. It won't be easier. It will be harder. So this is the danger. It's difficult. This work is not easy. It's not easy because the main obstacle is ourselves. It isn't the world. It isn't the church. It isn't your school. It isn't getting the books. It's your own mind. That's the problem. So my advice to students is be vigilant. Anything you think, anything you feel, any impulse that arises in you, question it. We spend a lot of time investigating the teachings and theorizing about things and studying, and we need to study. We need that. But really, the balance or the range of things we need to be involved in or focusing our energy on, the bulk of it should be on investigating ourselves. Really questioning, why do I think like this? Is this way of thinking right? Or is it going to take me into trouble? If we're not awakened now, if we're not done with the work, then we've got problems. And unless we identify the problems, we won't be able to fix them. Make sense? Yeah. Any other questions? What about back there? Okay. Thank you. The presentation of this lecture was made possible by donations from listeners like you. Help Gnostic Radio to help others. Make a donation by visiting gnosticradio.org. For questions and deeper understanding of this lecture, we invite you to explore the wide variety of resources available on our websites. Thank you for your support. May all beings be happy.